Hey y'all, it's Danielle
and Tricia,
and welcome to our March reading wrap-up. So we are going to be showing you all of the books that we read in March. We will start with Tricia and then go to me and then go back and forth. And we're going to tell you what the book was about, when we read it, and kind of our thoughts, and like kind of a little bit about what the book was. So, content warning. We will try to be as non-spoilery as we possibly can, but if you have not read these books, we will leave a list of the books down below, so that way you can check over, see if there's anything that you missed, and then Tricia will do a timestamp for every book.
Yes.
Because we love her. She does so good. And then that way you can skip over any books that are on your TBR that you haven't gotten to yet. All right, Trish, take it away.
So not every book I have read is physically in front of us. Because of that, I will superimpose the books around here somewhere. The first book that I finished in the month of March was Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. I read it at the very start of the month, and I gave it 5 stars. I picked it up based on an online recommendation and can't remember who from. I believe it was the YouTube channel Books and Lala, but I'm not actually certain. I know she's spoken about it, but I can't confirm that's actually where I got it from. I read it on Audible based on my sister's recommendation, and she was right. I absolutely loved it. The only thing was, it was so spooky, I could not listen to the audiobook while walking Yzma after dark.
Ooh.
Because I was too scared.
Oh dear. Oh no.
It's narrated by a little girl, so if that's something that would bother you, I wouldn't necessarily listen to the audiobook. Yeah. And the physical version, I've been told, has no punctuation because it's from a little girl's perspective. So keep that in mind if that is something that you'd be interested in reading. Like, those things can affect your enjoyment of the book, but I personally loved it.
Okay, so the first one that I read for the month of March was The Three Locks by Bonnie MacBird. And this is a Sherlock Holmes book told from the perspective of Watson. And there are 3 different storylines happening and multiple characters. So it's really interesting to try and see if you can figure out who actually did each crime. But then they kind of interrelate with each other because it's all happening in the same city. So it was really interesting. I would say, so this is part of a series. However, it's a standalone in the series, if that makes sense.
It does.
So it's like the series, but the books don't really have anything to do with each other. I ended up reading it from March 1st to 3rd, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. It was awesome, super quick read, super easy to get through. And if you are a fan of Sherlock Holmes, I thought it was an awesome book.
The second book I finished in the month of March was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I read it, I believe it was like March 8th to 13th, something like that. I finished it during our week of reading vlog, so you can see my more spoilery, not actual spoiler thoughts on that. Basically, I picked it up because one of my colleagues told me that I'd really like it, or she said that it's a good book and I would probably like it. So I read it for that reason. It's about a florist, Lily Bloom, and neurosurgeon, Ryle Kincaid. It's a romance book. And I don't know if anybody watching knows, but there's been a lot of drama around the movie that came out because, yes, it's romance, but it also deals with stuff like sexual assault, domestic abuse, generational trauma, cheating, and if you're not okay with any of that stuff, I do not recommend reading this book. And I ended up giving it 3 stars because it was okay.
Not every book can be a 5-star.
No, this one was not.
That's true. All right, so the second book that I finished was the Crescent Moon Tearoom by Stacy Sivinski. And I read this from March 4th to 6th. So it's about 3 sisters who are witches, and they are running a tea room, but they are summoned by the High Council to go on this journey that ultimately leads them, like, they're supposed to be helping other witches figure out what their, like, ultimate task is, but it actually leads them to finding their own. It was such a good story, and it definitely reminded me of us and our best friend Ashley. And I think I said this during our Q&A. It was so good to see the different sisters and their different personalities blossom throughout the book. So I ended up giving it a 5-star.
Yay!
So I started the month with 2 5-star books.
I'm so jealous.
I know. And they were so good, though. They were so good.
The third book that I finished in the month of March was It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is the second book in the duology. It follows what happens in It Ends With Us, with Lily Bloom being the main character as well, but as it's the second book, I don't really want to go too in-depth into it. I wasn't originally going to pick it up. My same colleague told me that I should because it gives you some closure on plot lines, so that's why I ended up reading it, and I rated this one also 3 stars.
Nice. All right, the third book, which I believe I also mentioned this one during our Q&A, is This Will Be Fun by E.B. Asher, which when I started this book, I did not know. The title is 3 authors' names put together. It's written by 3 different people, which I did not know that. I only found that out when I finished it. So I read it from March 6th to March 9th. It is the story of these group of friends that ended up saving the world they live in, but them 10 years later. And so it kind of showed their reunion, but something happened during them saving this realm that caused them not to talk for 10 years. So you kind of see their adventure of coming back together. I didn't love this book. It felt very much like if you took the contestants of a reality show or like the Real Housewives, like they all know each other, and just stuck them in medieval England. I didn't love it. There was like unnecessary drama, and like I know sometimes when books try to be all historical but with a modern twist, like it can be fun. I did not find This Will Be Fun. So I ended up giving it a 3-star. It is a standalone, but I don't know, it just wasn't for me. It was okay. It wasn't a terrible book, but just wasn't for me.
The fourth book that I finished in the month of March was actually The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. It was a reread for me, so I already knew I was going to enjoy it. It's a prequel of novellas for the Throne of Glass series. If you're reading it for the first time, I recommend not reading it first and actually read the series in release order, because the first 3 books hint at things that happened in the prequel. Book 4 actually acts as if the reader knows them as fact.
Okay.
But if you read the prequel first, then you don't really spoil anything for yourself because it happened in the past, but then you don't get the same pleasure of reading the hints and then finding out, oh, that's that person, oh, that fits there, oh, this is so cool. I ended up giving it 5 stars because I already knew I loved it. I love the series.
Love it. I love when you have a reread and you still love it. Yeah. Love it. Okay, the 4th book that I read is, and it's a long title, The Frugal Wizard's Guide to Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. This is part of a series, again, a standalone within that series. It's part of the Secret Project series, so there's quite a few that do not relate to each other, from my understanding. I did not know what to expect when I picked this up. I purely picked it up for the cover. Literally, I just loved the cover so much. But this book turned out to be something way more than I thought it was going to be. So basically, it's about a guy who is stuck in medieval England, unsure of who he is, where he comes from, how did he get there, and then throughout the book, his past is slowly revealed as he learns who he really is. And there is no way I was able to guess who he would really be, what would happen, how it would end. It kept me on the edge of my seat. And I finished it. I read it from March 9th to March 10th. I finished it in a day.
Damn.
Yeah, I started at like 5 p.m. on March 9th and then finished at like 11 a.m. March 10th. I did sleep between those, but yeah, it's so good, and I've recommended it to Trish, and I recommend it to all of you. So definitely a good one. Oh, and I rated it 5 stars.
The 5th book that I finished in March was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a by Mark Manson. The name explains the book. It's about learning how not to care about what other people think about you and how you look to the world. Just learning that, like, hey, you're imperfect, and that's perfect. I can understand why it's a good read for people, why some people like it. However, I'm not in a place in my life where I needed something like this.
Yes.
So, unfortunately for me, this was a 2-star. And I did read it basically throughout the month. This was my, like, when I have a chance, I'll read it book. So, it was okay. I can understand why some people love it. It just wasn't for me in this point of my life.
All right. The 5th book that I read is Hooked by A.C. Wise. This I picked up on Tuesday with Ashley and Tricia at Chapters. You can see that during our week of reading vlog. And I have been looking for a fairy tale retell for a couple months now because it's on my book bingo for the year. So this is a retelling of Peter Pan from Captain Hook's perspective. And he is being chased through London by a serial killer that turns out to be the monsters from his past. And he must seek help from none other than Wendy Darling. So it was quite the read. I did only end up giving it a 4-star just because there were some grammatical things that took me out of the story. It is by A.C. Wise, and it is a series. So this was actually the 2nd book, so I didn't actually read the 1st.
Oh!
I know, I didn't know that, and I figured it out. So I'm excited to eventually pick up the 1st. But if you are a Disney fan, this will ruin the story of Peter Pan. Also note, and I did say this during our week of reading vlog, this is not the Hooked that I know you and Ash own.
No, it is
not. That
not.
is smutty. This is not a smutty book. There are some moments, but not smut. So this was fantastic. 4-star rating. I read it from March 11th to the 13th.
The 6th book that I finished this month is actually Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. This is the UK cover, so it's not actually the cover that we have in Canada. It's also not the first cover that this book was released by. However, I think that the UK covers are just so gorgeous. So when my sister was living in England, I got the first 4 books of the series in these covers as well. I do have them in the North America covers, but highly recommend if you can. These ones are so pretty. They've also redone the covers of this series since I got them originally. Not nearly as nice as, in my opinion, as the ones that I had.
Okay.
Anyways, so Throne of Glass. This is another reread that I did this month. I read it over a period of 2 days or something. While I have the physical book in my hand, I was actually listening to it as my commuter book to go to and from the office. Knowing that I love this book, I did end up rating it 5 stars again. This is not the first time that I've reread the book. It's not going to be the last time I reread the book. It's about assassin Selena Sardothian, who becomes the Crown Prince's representative for the King of Otterland's contestant to become his champion.
Wow.
So chaos ensues not only with the competition itself, but all of a sudden in a land where magic is banned and doesn't exist, magical things start happening, and Selena has to deal with the other people she's competing against. Now all of a sudden these magical things that are happening in her everyday life.
Very cool. All right, so the 6th book that I ended up reading was a Perilous Undertaking. Now, I started this during March break and our week of reading. Then I ended up getting into a huge reading slump because I had read so much. So this actually ended up taking me longer. I read it from March 14th to the 24th. So a little bit longer than the previous books. It is by Deanna Raybourn. It is a Veronica Speedwell series. From what I understand, the books can be a standalone, but I think there are a few elements that kind of are continuous throughout the series. So Veronica Speedwell and her partner Stoker have to stop an innocent man from being hanged for murder and find out who actually did it. I ended up giving this a 3 stars. It was written in very Victorian time language, which I found extremely hard to get through. So I actually had put it down and had not picked it up for a week because I just needed a break, mental break. But it was pretty good. However, I found who actually killed it to be obvious. So,
I hate when that happens.
If you've read it, A Perilous Undertaking, let me know if you thought the person was obvious who ended up being it. So, 3 stars.
The 7th book that I finished this month was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. This is, again, the UK cover.
Yeah, clearly you hate this author.
I hate her so much. It's awful. There is actually stuff online about her not being great. Like, not necessarily her writing, but her as a person.
Oh.
So, that's something. I apologize if you hate Sarah J. Maas. I really like the series.
Her bad.
I bought them all way before all of the stuff came out.
Yeah.
I apologize. And I'm not going to lie about whether I read them or not, because this is a series that I do reread a lot.
Yeah.
So this is the second full-length novel in the series. Because of that, I'm not going to say anything about what happens in this book. I will say, though, that I'm enjoying this reread just as much as I have every other time that I've read it. And I once again gave this book a 5 stars.
Nice. All right, so the 7th book that I read is actually a book that all 3 of us now own. Ashley, Tricia, and I all own it. It was one of those 3 for 10 that Chapters has. I ended up being the only one who has read it so far. It is the Wagging Tail's Dog's Home by Sarah Hope. So it is the story of a small town, and our main character, Ginny, works with rescue dogs. She is planning a charity event to help fund the rescue. So they're basically trying to ensure that these dogs aren't going to the pound because then they will end up getting euthanized. So we picked it up because we all love dogs. She ends up meeting a news reporter, Daryl, and he ends up getting entangled with all this cast of characters at this dog's home. I did not like this book. On Goodreads, I know that this book and this series are very highly rated. This is part of a series. This author, Sarah Hope, has many, many books, and I'm sure it's for a lot of people. It was not for me. I did not care for the writing. I had a really hard time getting through it. I ended up taking a long time with this one as well. I read it from March 16th to the 26th. So again, 10 days to read it, and I ended up giving it a 2 stars. Just wasn't for me. Did not enjoy it. If you like her books, I am not judging you. To each their own. Not for me. 2-star read.
The 8th book that I finished this month was The Women in Black by Madeleine St. John. It's a cute slice of life story set in 1950s Australia. It's not my typical go-to of a book, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. It followed the women working in a store called Goods in the women's frock section. Ooh. And it was just like their life both at work and the things behind the scenes that their coworkers don't necessarily know about. Mm-hmm. So definitely not something that I typically picked up, but I enjoyed it enough to give it a 3-star, which isn't super high. I save 4 and 5 stars for like my favorites, but I'm quite happy that this got a 3.
Nice. Okay, so the last book for both of us for the month is our book club book, Bridgerton. We mentioned this many times in our week of reading. So this book is Daphne Bridgerton and the Duke of Hastings, Simon Bassett, begin a whirlwind romance showcasing the trials and tribulations of the Regency era dating scene. So obviously there's a TV show. If you watched the TV show and read the book, let us know what your thoughts were. I've watched all of the seasons of Bridgerton. She's watched season 1. So, and this book is the first book, so it's about season 1.
Well, half of this book. This is actually the first 2 books in the series.
This is 2 books together.
We are currently talking about The Duke and I, which is book 1.
The first one.
It's only this much of the book.
Okay.
So it's half of the book.
So if you've seen season 1, let us know. If you've read the book and seen the show, let us know what your thoughts were. I personally liked the show way better. I found this very dry, very boring. Not as good as the show. I still enjoyed some parts of it, so I ended up giving it a 3-star.
I am very upfront about how much I do not like historical fiction. This book and the show, as much as everybody tells me that they're great, I was very bored the entire time I was watching and reading it, unfortunately. I ended up giving it a 2 stars. Sorry.
And if you would like to know Ashley's thoughts, I do believe she gave it a
5-star.
5-star. Ashley loved it. She's the one who suggested it for this book club month. I love the fact of how beautiful it is.
Oh, they're so pretty.
It will remain on our shelves. So, yes, Ashley ended up giving it a 5-star for the month. So 5, 3, 2. So varying opinions. But that's why we love being in a book club, all three of us, because we all like different genres and stuff, and that's what makes it interesting and fun to talk about. All right, so that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave us a comment down below what you managed to read during March. As you all know, I was on March break, so I definitely got way more reading done. And as you know, Tricia was a busy bee because she's our fabulous editor for these videos. So that's why there's a little bit of a difference in the reading. But stay tuned because next month we will have our April TBR coming out at the beginning of the month. And then at the end, stay tuned for our April reading wrap up and see what we managed to get through then. And we hope you have a fantastic time reading. Bye!
Bye!